really, they meet me, they think I'm a really super nice guy and just all this other stuff. And that's my shield, dude. I don't want anybody to know or think I'm a threat or I know anything. They want to think I'm a big, goofy meathead. Fantastic. That's exactly what I want them to think. Because if I need the information, I want it to be a total surprise. I've never had a time in my professional life where Americans have been more concerned about their own self-protection. Welcome back to the second of 3 interviews with Tom Kier, SAYOC Tactical. Now, we ended yesterday with Tom going over how they use the feedback loop in their system and how they're constantly improving things. And he's going to elaborate more on that and then go more in depth on the look and also the training methodologies behind what they do at SAYOC Tactical and how he personally looks at things. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. I can't believe the feedback I'm already getting. I knew this would be a popular one. But again, it gets better as we go along, believe it or not. So enjoy. This is going to be our second part of the interview with Tom. And yes, I will collect any of your questions for Tom and make sure that I pass them on. I know a lot of you have already asked questions based on what you've heard so far. What I would say is let's leave it till the end. And after part 3 is the whole interview is done, then I will start submitting questions and following up on some of your inquiries with Tom. But he does cover a lot of the material that a lot of you have asked in the other parts of the interview. That said, make sure that you go to timlarkin.com, get your free masterclass, and also share this. If you'd like content like this interview with Tom, please share it with people that you know have similar interests, because that's how we're growing, and I really appreciate it. Without further ado, Tom Kier. You're seeing the cutting edge. You're seeing the guys that are coming back from the worst areas, most challenging areas. We talked a little bit about this in LA, but I'd really like you to elaborate on it. I mean, it doesn't seem to me oftentimes, you guys are very mission focused, and it doesn't seem that a lot of these other programs necessarily help the mission. They don't, they're not bad, but they're just, I think they give a false sense in some ways.
Yeah, they're not optimized. I mean, some of these are, some of these other guys who are involved in combatives as part of a contractor who does combatives for the military. Some of the guys are, first of all, they're looking at a program that may be, hey, we're going to teach 50,000 Marines or Army guys or something like that. So that program has to be structured to facilitate that. And you can't try to do what we're doing and teach 10,000 people at a it wouldn't work.
Right.
You would have to, you would have to structure differently. So, in their defense, that's like what they have to do to teach that many people.
Yeah.
There are some people out there who really, they're looking at it as an opportunity to make money, and it's a business, and they're structuring it as a business. And they show up to teach a unit somewhere, and they'll show up by themselves, or they won't even show up. They'll send one of their flunkies to go do it.
Right.
And when I show up to train 20 guys, I bring 10 instructors.
Yeah.
Like, I show up with 10 instructors. By the way, all those instructors are master level instructors.
Right.
We roll deep, because I know that realistically, that's what we need to do to impart this knowledge in any kind of realistic way in the 40 hours that we have for this contract, or whatever. Sometimes the contracts are 2 weeks, but in most cases, you're just getting a week with these guys on their workup. So what do I need to do to optimize the transfer of information and to answer all the questions that are unique to each of these individuals? I need to have enough instructors there to do that. So, that costs a lot of money to bring those guys. But you know what? It's worth it for what we're doing.
Right.
I see some people in the combatives area that are kind of deluded. They're not connected to reality anymore, or maybe they never were, but they are very good at marketing. They're very good at selling themselves. They're probably really awesome on Instagram, or I I really don't do much of that. And you know, we're really word of mouth for us. If you go to our website, SAYOC Tactical Group, it's like something that some guy made up as like a bare minimum, because you have to have a place to go to.
Right.
But we don't do any business through there. You know, all the business is some guy calling me, usually from a number that won't show up on my phone, and then he's, you know, hey, we want to bring you in on a contract. I'm like, okay. A lot of times I don't even know who they are because they won't tell me.
Right.
Like I'm trying to figure out who they are. But you know, so I just say, hey, what do you want to train in? What are you doing downrange? What's your mission set? And they'll give me some information on that, and then we'll develop a custom curriculum for that group. Now it will have a lot of similarities to other curriculums that we've done, but it will be a unique mixture of those things for that group, and for what they're about to do. And so I don't see other companies really doing that. I see them kind of like, hey, this is what we're training in. And I look at the training and I'm like, you know, I think back to all those guys in some kind of horse stance, you know, like with a locked in reverse punch, like chambered on their hip,
Right.
jumping around in the alleyways, and me just looking over at this guy who I just hired to work in the bar as a bouncer, and I'm watching him hop around, and I'm like, what is that guy doing over there?
Yeah.
And of course, he's not effective at all. And I'm like, you know, that's not. And I'm, you know, grabbing a guy, pulling his shirt over his head, and you know, look like I'm in a hockey fight, because that works with that guy who's got that fucking hoodie on. You know, you grab it, you pull that hoodie over his face, you start punching him in through the hood.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, and I look over these martial artists, and I'm like, you're fired. You know, I had to fire him. Yeah. But I look at some of these guys teaching combatives, and they have the same kind of misinterpretation of what it's really going to be like. And you know, but they're getting hired because they have good publicists, or they have good whatever, you know. And you know, I don't have any of that stuff, but I see a lot of that in the industry, and it's I am a little bit emotional about it, because I've built enough of a relationship with the guys that are being trained that, you know, I know them. Like, I know their kids, their family, their wives. You know, we spend a lot of time together, you know, and a lot of them don't come home, you know. So when I see someone out there teaching these people, you know, I'm like, hey, this is a serious thing you're doing. This is not a joke. You know, this is a guy who's about to go down range and fight. And if you give him some bad information or burn some bad reps, or that's a pretty serious thing. You know, you should take it a little bit more serious than you are. But, you know, that's the way it is. You know, you're not going to be able to, you know, first of all, I don't know everything. I might be wrong about it, but that's just my perspective, you know. But you know, there's a lot of goofiness in the combative industries, and then there's a lot of great guys too. You know, there's a lot of guys that I have a lot of respect for. You're one of them. You know, when I met you out in LA recently, you know, you were one of the guys that's like, I look at everyone who's there, I'm like, man, I really want to meet Tim Larkin, because I had known about you for a long time, and you were like, you know, I look at you, I'm like, hey, if I live near that guy, we'd be friends, because he's a tough guy. He's like a guy that you would look at on the street and be like, yeah, that guy can handle himself. So, you know, I was happy to meet you, you know. So there's guys out there like yourself, but I would probably say there are more clowns out there than guys who are good. You know what I mean? Percentage wise, you know, the Tim Larkins are rare, but they're out there, you know.
Well, I appreciate that. It was funny you're saying that. I mean, that was what got me to go to the symposium, was I saw your name.
Yeah, right on.
I called a mutual friend of ours and I said, hey, I said, I'm going to go do this just because Tom's there. And so that was a great, so that was my big strategy, was to get there and meet you.
Right
And,
on, right on, brother. Well, I'm glad you did.
Well, I really resonate with what you're doing, dude. I mean, you're walking a really hard road, because, you have ethics, and you want to give the guys what they really need, and they're able to come back to you, and you're doing it at the highest levels, and of not only in the military area, you're all over the place with real people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you don't need the traditional BS that's out there. I think what's really, especially for the people listening here, I have this, I think I was telling you prior to the interview, when I was leaving some messages for you, kind of this idea, your talk that you gave on the 3 components of force, time, and space. It was one of the best strategy talks, understanding real strategy in an environment that I've really ever heard you. It's very succinct, and I think it's brilliant. And it got me to kind of pull out and say, I see a lot of the industry, and I want you to share what you will on that. But what it really came to me was, when you call it whatever it is. I mean, we like to just call it in the world of violence, but if you're going to put it in a category, I would say, if you're looking for self-defense in the real world, or self-protection in the real world, meaning everything's open, it's the reality of the world, that requires an overall strategy. The tactics that everybody gets caught up in, the punching and kicking and all that, that's actually the easy stuff. And I don't mean, you got to put the work in, but if you don't have the component, if you don't know how to conduct yourself, and let me just share the one story that got me, that I knew you knew it, was during your presentation, you talked about, hey guys, I don't go out drinking with my buddies. I don't go out there. Now, you're a guy you're a bouncer for years, you understand that. And, first people are going to assume, oh, it's because you want to avoid this, or you want to avoid getting out there, which, yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. But what I thought was more interesting was the consistency of your mindset. You said, no, the reason I don't want to go out there is because I know one of you knuckleheads is going to probably drink too much, and something's going to happen. And you know what my response is going to be. You're my friend, and I only have one switch. And if I see anybody going for it, and he goes, the repercussions of that are just not worth it for me at this stage of my life. You've got a family, you've got everything there. But what I thought was really awesome about that was you were crystal clear. I mean, it was crystal clear with how you train, how you live, and you took it into, I mean, sometimes it's probably, there's probably still, the old young guy in you going, it'd be kind of fun to go out with those guys, because they're fun dudes, and they're interesting guys. And I'm sure, it'd be interesting. But I thought that statement alone kind of showed me that you get it, because if you don't have behavior modification, if you don't understand, especially once you're trained the way you're trained, that's a huge responsibility to be walking around with. You're walking around basically with your own nuclear weapon, and you got to be really careful.
Yeah. That's the thing is, I was talking recently, I go everywhere. I don't go anywhere without weapons on me. And most times I have multiple blades and pistols and stuff like that on me. But the thing is, when you carry around that type of stuff, you immediately need to understand how to be polite, how to avoid confrontation, because, I can't afford to be sloppy. I can't afford to be callous or impolite to people, because someone else might decide to step up. And I've started something with weapons on me, and that needs to be understood. And to your point about the I tell people I'm not going to go out drinking or partying or doing any of that stuff, because we're all too dangerous for that. That's okay for the kids, but grown men who are lethal, where does that end? If you're in a situation, if you go out into a situation where the statistical probability of you getting in a violent altercation is high, and that violent altercations are not something you're going to allow to lose. I'm not going to let some bouncers beat on me or my friends or any of that stuff. So um, I'm not going to sit there and allow it to happen. Well, guess what? If I don't allow it to happen, they escalate. And if they escalate, I escalate because I'm not allowing it to happen. So where does that end? Well, unless they're skilled, unless they have all the weapons on that I have and the capability of using them, it ends up with them all dead
Yeah.
because I'm not losing. So, uh, I understand that you want to go out partying tonight, but I'm not looking to kill any bouncers tonight. So we're not going to do that. And, a lot of times it's very sobering because some of these young guys that we were training, they're 20 some year old Navy SEALs and they like to go out partying. And I tell them, let's be more professional than that because don't act like you're a kid, act like you're an adult who's dangerous and be responsible and be professional. And a lot of times that sobers them right up. They immediately go, yeah, you're right. That's because I'm not saying, be defensive, be safe, be cautious, because they don't want to hear that.
Right.
What I'm telling them is be dangerous.
Yeah.
And you're dangerous and you can't afford to play around with it. We don't need to juggle any cleavers and pistols right now. Like that's too dangerous. There's no reason for it. So, understand that you are a dangerous person. You're a professional, and act like it. And I've had that talk with a whole bunch of young SEALs who go, they turn themselves around, and with young guys of all young men, are trapped between being a kid and being a man. You know,
Yeah.
and when they choose to be a man, they start acting differently. And that's all. When you see a bunch of guys out drinking at night, they're not choosing to act like men, they're acting like kids.
Yeah.
So that's what we talk to them about. But it is an important distinction, and it has to be clear, like you were saying. You have to be very clear and consistent in your philosophy, or else you end up running into problems. But,
Well, yeah. What they don't understand is if you are trained that way and
yeah,
that's your mindset, if you soften that for the environment, like, okay,
that's right.
I'm gonna like, that's the time it happens to you, man. That's the
Yep.
time where the blade gets slipped in that you didn't think was there. They were coming
Yep.
in because you made assumptions and you let your guard down, you let your principles down, and you allowed the
Yep.
environment to take that away from you.
Yeah.
And it's not being defensive, it's being proactive. It's like, it's thinking ahead of time, going, okay, this
Yeah.
environment. And my biggest thing with people is, especially when I train civilians, whether they get the nuts and bolts of being able to physically use the information, that's up to them.
Yeah.
Meaning, what work they're going to put in.
Right.
But what it does for me is when they see what it would take, if they ignore everything and they do what they want, they put themselves willingly into a situation they could have, made a better decision in.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, if you're here, now you're here. And this is the minimum what it's going to take for you to get out of here. This is what you're going to have to do to another human or
Yeah.
humans.
Yep.
And then boom. And what's great about that is my big goal is behavioral change.
Yeah.
It's that, and you're doing that for young, aggressive kids that are well trained. And that's even a bigger service because, those nothing's, I saw it happen one time in Imperial Beach when a person who thought they were invulnerable quickly found out they weren't. And
Yeah.
in the eyes, I've never seen eyes like that. And it's just horrific. And when you
Yeah.
see that go down and he's a good guy, just made a dumb decision
Yeah.
and didn't
And
understand.
and that's the thing. We have to remember that any one of us could be there.
Oh yeah.
Like if nobody is immune to it. And when you watch, and I know that because I've seen your presentation and it's fantastic, but you watch video of violence happening. Hey, that could be you, that could be me, that could be anybody. There's no one's immune to it.
Yeah.
We have to understand that. Like if you think that you can't be sucker punched or can't be shot by some thug who's running around shooting over his head. Hey, those bullets are going to hit something. They can hit you as much as it. So, and it happens fast. And how fast things turn. The person that you want to get in a fight with on the road or cut you off or something like that, wave to him and let him go. What's the big deal?
Right.
Because that guy, you don't know what's going on with him. And the thing is, he steps out and just starts throwing some rounds in your direction. You can catch one of them just like anybody else.
Wow.
So it's like being respectful of violence is part of it. Being a master of violence requires respect. You're not going to a master of it if you don't respect it.
Yeah, people don't. People get. They're strange when it's strange when like some of my true civilian friends, who really they meet me, they think I'm a really super nice guy and just all this other stuff, and that's my shield, dude. I don't want anybody to know or think I'm a threat or I know anything. They want to think I'm a big goofy meathead. Fantastic, that's exactly what I want them to think. Because if I need the information, I want it to be a total surprise.
That's right. Yeah.
But you really put it in a really good context. And what I tell people is, if you get a chance to listen to Tom talk about, the three areas of a true strategy that you really truly have to understand, manipulate. You make it so easy. Like what I loved about it was three things. You could remember them. You didn't have this whiteboard full of just garbage that made you look good. It was clear communication. Could you kind of just share that overall concept with people?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call them the elements of conflict. And, it's important to understand that all conflict is made up of these three elements. And there is not a fourth element that we're leaving out. In other words, because it's a universal, meaning that it applies to all conflict universally. They get, applications. There can be thousands of applications and thousands of techniques and millions of these things, because each one is a derivative of a universal or some aspect of it. So as you begin to distill anything down to its universal kind of form, they get less and less and less at the very bottom of that distillation. So as we look at conflict, or the elements of conflict, there are only three, and that is force, space, and time. And everything in conflict is a combination of force, space, and time. And the important thing is, if you are fighting against something else, a group or an individual, there are three elements of what I'm going to be able to control, and those can also be controlled by the person that I'm fighting or the group that we're fighting. And they are force, space, and time. Now, for me to win, decisively win, I control all of those elements. Now, for me to control all three, of course, I'd first had to control two and then fight to get the last one. So the person who has two of those elements controlled is the person who's winning, but has not won yet until they get the third element. And as we begin to look at these, force, space, and time, we say, hey, force, what is it? Force is my ability to affect the enemy, the other person, my ability to physically affect them, to change what they can physically do, whether it's movement or application of violence on their part. But my force is what I have that allows me to affect them. Space is my ability to move freely or keep them from moving freely, like control choke points, free movement for flanking and breaking contact. All of these types of elements of freedom of movement and range, these are all control of space. So How well do I control his space? How do I take that away from him, of him being able to move freely, to change angles, to get an angle on me, or elevation, or high ground? This is all controlled space. And then the last is time. So force, space, and time. Time is the element of initiative, like who has the initiative. I talk about it in chess. And by the way, chess is a conflict. If you play chess, there are only 3 elements of that conflict, which is force, space, and time. Force are the pieces that you have on the board that can attack. Space is your ability to move these and attack along range or angle or distance of some sort, your freedom of movement. And time is tempo in chess. So that's how they refer to it in chess, is tempo. And that just means I have the initiative. I could be the black pieces or the white pieces, it doesn't matter. But in this game of chess, the other person is responding to me if I have tempo, if I have time. In other words, I move a piece on the board, he must respond to that or lose something valuable to him. He can't do what he thought he was going to do. He's going to respond to what I just did. And that sets up a relationship of feeder and receiver. So the feeder is the person who has time on his side, and he is initiating some event that the receiver must respond to, rather than play the game that they want to play. Rather, that their plan has to go away and they have to respond to the plan that I'm initiating. Now, because of that, they are behind in time, and they never get a chance to actually develop their plan. They're constantly just defending and blocking and looking to protect themselves from what I'm doing. Now, the same thing happens in a fight, right? If you control time in a fight, you initiate, you cause them to respond to that initial attack of some sort, and they begin blocking, defending, parrying, avoiding, not doing what they want to do, but trying not to get their head knocked off. Right. They're covering. Now, in that time that they were doing that, I mount another attack. They then have to respond to that new attack, not with what they wanted to do, but with some defensive posturing. And then they take up their turn doing that. And then I attack again, and I attack again. And each time they try to defend. Rather than formulate and execute their plan, they are just trying not to die. And eventually, because a certain percentage of these attacks will get through, they will cause disruption. They will cause chaos. They will cause more delay in their ability to deal with things. So, you start a fight off, and you hit a guy with a straight right hand, and you hit him right on the button. Let's say you don't knock him out, but you definitely put him on his heels. He's bringing his hands up, trying not to get hit again. And while he does that, I throw another punch. And then I throw another one and another one and another one. And pretty much he ends up being standing fetal position, or on the ground in a fetal position. And he is not even trying to fight anymore. He's just trying not to die. Well, that's how you win. That's how you win everything. So, in a two armies that are facing each other, you control force, space, and time. You, with a force that you have, you cross space, you confine them, and you hit them before they hit you. You're ahead in time, and you maintain that initiative with constant pressure. That is, what we like to call steady pressure, and just, ball them up, ball those guys up. And it's analysis of force, space, and time. Now, the reason it is very important to designate the areas or elements of conflict, force, space, and time, and to define it, is because once you can define it and once you can put names on it, you can assess what you control in any given conflict. you can say, do I control force here? Do I have all my guns online in angles that they can shoot? Or do I have my hands in my pockets? Or are my hands up in a position that I can begin to affect the enemy? We break down force into potential force and actual force. So if I have my hands in my pockets, well, potentially I could punch him, but I got my hands in my pockets. So actually I can't punch him. But if I get my hands out of my pockets and get them up, now that force becomes actual force, something that can be applied in reality. And then we look at space, footwork, movement. If you're sitting in a chair during this fist fight that happens, and that guy's standing over top of you, space is not something that you have at your disposal. Now you can get up from that chair and push him back and kind of gain some movement, or you can come out of that chair and flip it around in between you and him, creating a barrier and also creating space. And then, so what are the different ways I create space and control space? If I'm fighting a guy and I push him into a corner, I want to keep him from being able to flank on me and angle on me. I want to put him in a corner and sit him down and start throwing some elbows. I want to control space so that my force is more effective. And time, I want to go first, and it's my turn every turn. I watch people train in martial arts, and they do a drill, and they're never taken out of the drill. They do the drill where it's like, strike, block, strike, parry, block, strike, and it's like almost a choreographed exchange. Well, you're saying it's his turn, my turn, and then it's my turn and his turn, and then it's his turn and it's my turn every turn. Like, we don't train to give them a turn. I tell people all the time, it's funny, you could be standing in front of 20 Navy SEALs and you say, hey, when you put your hands up in front of you and you're like this, who taught you that? Your uncle, your dad? And they go, yeah, my dad taught me that. I'm like, well, tell him he didn't do you any favors. Because when you stand in front of someone and pick your hands up, what are you saying? You know what you're saying? It's your turn. Go ahead. Like, all right, let's fight. Your turn. That's what you're saying. I'm not putting my hands up like that. I'm not saying it's his turn. He's going to get hit in the middle of a conversation that we're having with my hands that are up, and I'm moving around, or I have some kind of hand position, but that hand position is not, okay, it's your turn. Okay, go ahead, take a shot. No, it's my turn every turn. I start the show off, I'm going to hit you, and then I'm going to keep hitting you until you're horizontal and unconscious. Yeah. So this is not a game. This is not a sport that we're playing, and it's never your turn. It's always my turn. And take that mentality. Now, look, if he's good enough, he'll find a way to have a turn, and you might not have anything that you can do about it. And that's life. And you know what? Let's get the turn back, and it's going to be my turn every turn. I slipped up a little bit, and he stung me. I backed up a little bit, but now I got to get time back on my side now. So, don't drill to have to give him a turn. I'm not giving him any turns.
It's so important that the terminology you use and how you talk to yourself.
Yes.
Like this attacker defender stuff. It's just like, no, you're never a defender. You're never a no. And people think that's macho bullshit, and it's not. It's when you talk to the alpha pro, like go to prison systems. Those guys never see them on the losing side of violence. No. They can't imagine it. All they do is they'll look at something, they'll say, and whoever the winning side of that was, if they're really good, they'll go, I like that, but I would have done it this way. Meaning they would find an even better way to have done what was already successful.
Yeah. And these are guys where violence is, they have to understand it.
Yeah.
It's not a game. It's not a game to them. This is their life.
Yeah.
So,
that's a hard concept for people to get, protecting your mind that way.
That's right. That's right. So force, space, and time is a way that we can analyze what we did, look at it afterwards and go, did I control space there? Man, I could have jammed this. I could have got back and drawn my pistol, because my rounds fly out of the end of my gun, and I don't need to be up in that guy's face. I could have gotten some range and transition to a different weapon system and use that space to apply force over a very small time frame, and won that whole engagement, rather than getting a fist fight with a guy. Maybe it was a bad situation. So, the thing is, you're constantly evaluating whatever happened, and you can look at any video. And I do video analysis like we all do. Anyone who's serious in this business that we're in takes advantage of the millions of videos that are online of people getting stabbed and shot and beat up and all that stuff. And there are great lessons to be learned there. But when we look at a video and we analyze it, we want to be able to analyze it in the most effective way possible. And that means let's get language. And I've heard you use very clear language, very scientific language of what exactly is happening here. Let's put a name on it so that we can reference that. We can talk about it philosophically. We can talk about it scientifically. Without the proper language, you can't do that. So, who's the feeder here? We say feeder receiver. Is this guy feeding? Does he maintain the feed throughout the entire event? Does he give up the feed? Does this force element come in and he backpedals and he gave up the feed and allowed that guy to tee off on him because he saw another guy come into the frame? He put the brakes on because he wasn't ready for that. And rather than angle on the first guy and take the fight to him, he paused. And when he paused, they attacked him, and this is as an example, but if we don't have the right language to speak about it and have conversations, we're not going to learn everything we can learn from watching that video. So we have a lot of language that we have, and force, space, and time are a way for us to analyze it, talk about it, discuss it. So we have to put names on it, and we have to, take this and break this down so we can extract from this video all of the valuable information that's there. And I've heard you do it as well. So
that's a great place for us to start. So when part 3 starts, he's going to get right back into feeder receiver and just finish out with some amazing closing comments that I think you'll all like. But again, just an awesome, understanding of, his concept, his force, time, and space, and just understanding what that means. I've actually been able to clarify some of my concepts for people. It was clearer for them to understand that than the way I was saying it before. So I give Tom full credit for that. But again, it's just a better way of saying things. Clear communication is absolutely essential, especially at the highest levels of the force continuum, or weapons free. When it's justified lethal force and you're availed to do it, you need specific information. And that's what I really like about these guys is they're working at the highest levels there, and they constantly are looking for ways to improve how they do it. So that's the end of part 2. Remember, timlarkin.com. Go sign up for your free masterclass. It's also how we keep you in touch with you. Email is very important. One of the few things that they're not screwing with right now. And we can always get out our information, regardless of whether or not the platform gets, taken down. We will always have a way of getting a hold of you if you give us your email. So timlarkin.com, get your free masterclass. Also, please continue to share this. Share this interview with people. Subscribe to the channel. Tell others about it. It's really growing fast, and we appreciate all your efforts. So until next time, stay safe.